At the end of the day, the endpoints, if I can call it, are still humans, right?
The Shift, Agentic Edition, connects the people building AI tools with those creating agents so we can all level up together. Today, we're taking a beat with the Microsoft Fabric team, Ron, Josh, Dipti, and Killian, to talk openly about a question we heard from you. Are my agents hunting for data?
I think one of the things that I think may be good for us to start is it's interesting that like AI is not a thing that kind of like happened today, right? It's had a long history. Like we talk about agents, but agents has been around sort of in the technology landscape for a while. And then the algorithm has been around for a while. And I think the interesting today is the combination of that agent and the algorithms and ultimately to take action. We focus a lot on the models. We focus a lot on the agents. But one of the areas that we don't give enough attention is the data.
Models have been obviously revolutionary in terms of what they can do, but I think what we're finding is the actual differentiation between the models is becoming less and less day by day, right? They're kind of converging. I think the question is not necessarily, can this model give me insights about this topic? It's more, does that model have the actual grounding, that knowledge that you provide for it to get those answers? I mean, I saw a stat recently that was 85% of AI projects cite data as the reason why it's not succeeding. And the reason for that is because it's on the business to actually provide that context, to provide that data. And all that data lives in very different places.
There's been a lot of focus on data traditionally. It's how we did analytics. We built out our data. We spent a lot of time getting our data right. We had a lot of processes that have developed over decades that we followed for a long time. Now the models are new. The data hasn't become less important. Now we also have a lot more things that can be treated as data. And I think what we're going to find is a lot of the old patterns are going to apply to the new data. And as we start to get more comfortable with the models, the focus is going to come back to, all right, we're going to leverage what we have. We're going to make more out of the things that are now the new data for us.
Yeah, and it's funny, the stat you said, it's like 85% fail because of the data. It's more like because of the lack of good data, because there's a ton of data, right? There's data everywhere. Right now, there's like so many metrics just being collected of this podcast that we're recording, and it's a ton of data. So is it valuable? What is the context in it? And so when you think of data as context, it suddenly starts to make sense that you need the context to make better decisions. You need the context to take actions. And to get there, it's not just the raw data, but getting it into the right shape and the right form so that it can be more consumable. In the past, it used to be more consumable for humans to create reports or dashboards. Now it needs to be consumable for agents, and that is non-trivial, right? And so I think that's, to your question, Ron, that's when people will realize, okay, how valuable is my agent truly? Am I actually making good decisions? Am I taking the right actions? It will come down to how do I improve that. First step is just getting it to work, which is where we are at, right? And we're trying to drive efficiencies. But when you go a level deeper and say, well, how do I actually get more efficiency? How do I make better decisions? It comes to context. Do I have the right context? You go a level deeper and comes to good data, and how do I get to good quality data? Comes to, well, where is this data coming from? And that's where the entire sort of pipeline and data journey starts, right?
And I think like that piece of that context, it's so inherent to humans, right? Like
Yes.
we live and breathe context as part of our role. We know what teams I'm on, like who should own what, like what that data means. But an agent doesn't naturally know that,
That's
and
right.
we have to provide that context.
So I think that comment on context is so important because the quality of the data that feeds these agents really determines kind of the outcome that you're going to get. If you have data that have no context going in, the likelihood that the agent's going to provide you with an answer that is lacking in context is just that much higher.
Yeah. Because data is fragmented, it is everywhere. Like IT systems have been around for many, many, many years, right? A lot of our systems are, banks, et cetera, still running on mainframes, believe it or not. And so that consolidation is hard. It's really hard, right? Over time, you might have different data sources, different databases, data warehouses, lake houses, all the way from the oldest to the newest. And there wasn't a way to truly unify. We didn't have the infrastructure for a long time.
I think we've done some things with OneLake specifically to actually make this possible now. It's more than just saying, hey, we're going to have a catalog and we're going to unify everything. It's, we've taken some real practical steps to make it so you really can bring all your data together.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's been such a challenge up until this point?
Right? When are we going to see the end of this project?
The Apollo
right?
project.
So it was this unicorn kind of an idea, which is, wow, wouldn't it be amazing to have all your data in one place?
Yes,
it's this
reports
magical thing, and you're telling me, Josh, that it actually exists. Yeah, and so it's hard, right? Because if you go to the fragmentation, historically we've had many different problems to solve. Operational database, transactions. You go to the store, you swipe your credit card or you tap it, then that manifests into data. You sit in your car, there's, where you're headed, all of this data. So that's more context. Then you go home and you have now increasingly your devices at home that are connected and your entity as in your house and a family and all of that. So when you look at all this context, it's a lot of different systems. And over the last, I would say, 20, 30 years, each problem was solved in silos. Guess what? You just created 30 databases, and they're not all the same flavor.
I bet you every single one of those started with, we're going to do it in one place.
That's right.
Yeah. I think that's always been the problem with the migration project, right? You migrate everything to one place, but there's a reason why you have specialized data products that you're using. I think the beauty that we're doing here is with virtualization, you can just point directly to the existing databases or whatever data services that you're using without necessarily migrating it, because that will naturally fall apart. Whereas this won't fall apart because you're not actually moving anything.
Yes,
and the truth is, hub and spokes that have hubs everywhere. What we've done differently here is, yes, there's technology that makes it easy to just virtualize things, bring them together. But also, we put OneLake, we put the data in the places where you work. So it's the easiest place for data just to land. And it becomes more natural. Data just flows into the right places and the right things start to happen. Now, it just happens, right? And that's what's going to start happening here is that we have all these disparate sources, we're going to unify them. We'll probably do it virtually. We'll bring them together. But just more and more naturally, these things are going to land and fit and work together. And I think that's the beauty of the system we've built here is we start to make that possible. And the more natural this becomes, the more it shows up in the places where you work, the less and less silos will just naturally occur without a big effort to go do so. With OneDrive, we're going to do the same with data with OneLake.
I've always loved that analogy because I remember the days you'd email your Word doc to somebody, they would make edits. It never really lived anywhere. It was impossible to track changes. And then SharePoint came along, OneDrive came along. You just put it in one single place. Everyone's working off the same copy. It's absolutely life-changing, and you don't even think about it anymore.
You don't hunt for that network file share.
Exactly, and now we can do the same thing with data, where everybody can actually see the same data item, work on the same data item together without creating all these different version control issues that we used to have with documents.
Yeah. And truly, that's one of the principles of OneLake is one copy, right? You don't want to have n copies for all the users and all the use cases or even slight changes. You have one copy. It might even sit outside of OneLake, but it's linked into OneLake. We call that a shortcut. And then it can be consumed in many different ways, but it's truly one place, one namespace, one unified experience for all those use cases. With virtualization and with shortcuts, you don't go to migration. That's one part of it. But the second part of it is that you want to solve new problems. Agentic is one, models is another, real-time is another aspect. If you keep what you have on the operational side, you bring that data into OneLake, you can use that data in different ways with different engines on top of the lake itself and solve different kinds of problems and use the right engine for the right job, but with the same lake, with the same set of documents, with the same data, the same context. That is very, very powerful, and that's obviously Fabric. We've finally have this eureka moment where it's possible. Yeah. Now you can go and be ready for your agents. And so then you get back to the place where can we actually have 100% context?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, even though agents are sort of becoming more and more prevalent, like the endpoints, if I can call it, are still humans, right? And our engineering teams looking at product performance, right? So I think that's still such an important point not to lose sight of is that yes, we're talking about agents, we're talking about AI, we're talking about the importance of data to power these systems, but ultimately is to enable sort of more efficiency and more performance and more scale from the humans that are at the end of the consumption points. We've been talking about abilities or possibilities for customers to start to really bring their data together to get more performance out of their AI ambitions. But from a lot of the conversations that we all have with customers, customers are at different places in that maturity curve, trying to make sense of that sprawl that's in their organization, right? That mainframe that is still, like operating some really critical transaction data at the bank every single day. Like, what do we do with that? That SQL server that is like sitting in the corner of a warehouse.
Well, I think that's when we start thinking about that maturity curve, right? Of like, there's an agentic maturity curve as well, which is, I just want to start using Copilot, I want to get to that ground floor. But when we start thinking about the long-term maturity curve for using and building custom agents, it really starts with the data platform. So you're doing the groundwork now in order for the future when you actually really want to start scaling agents across your business.
One of my bigger surprises when I talk to customers, what's the next set of sources we should prioritize for bringing data into OneLake? Whether we bring in through shortcuts or we bring in through our mirroring approach, or we do with databases. I'm expecting to see all these customers come back with all these unstructured sources, like bring in my emails, bring in all these documents. And there was definitely some of that. And every customer had that ambition, but they didn't yet know what to do with that data. And the data they most understood was the traditional SQL server, the database that's been running in the corner for a while. And it was like, how do you get those sources in first? We're gonna start there because we know this data. And we know the questions we want to ask for that. We want to see what AI can do on that.
There's, on a technical spectrum, there's many different places to start. Like we've talked about unification. I think it's really important. But you kind of have to, ground yourself a bit, because I'm still learning every day, right? In fact, I'm like, oh, this is new today. And I think it comes down to, as an organization, what is your strategy? Where are you headed? What is your competitive advantage? Can you use AI to really make that competitive advantage? But to transform the business in this AI era, you really have to rethink how you're doing it. So it might come down to, what is the core business? How do I transform it? We've been doing the same way for 20 years. Is it time? And their data as a service is now, built on our platforms. Data is in OneLake. It's unified so that they can serve their agents, can leverage it better. Their customers' agents can leverage it better. So it really comes down to, what is the value that you're bringing to your customers, and then go deep in it and actually build out that foundation.
I also think that there is, how do I not only enable a top-down agentic approach, like what are the core problems in my business that maybe agents can tackle, but also how do I enable self-service agentic creation to also enable your individual business users to feel comfortable creating agents based on data that, that you've provided. Because I think the combination of a top-down agentic approach plus a ground-up agentic approach is going to really set a lot of companies apart.
It's funny, you came back to the point where, how useful is your AI and how useful is your agents, where it can be a trusted agent only if it's trusted data, right? And it's trusted context.
And the trust in the data, but also how we enable propagation of that data, around governance, around how we secure it, around how we make sure that as we're creating the OneLake sales agent, that the person that is interacting with that agent is not accidentally seeing some kind of privileged information that Killian and you happen to provide as a source, right? So I'm curious, how do I just connect all these endpoints? How do I make sure that as the data is transiting all these different stops along the way before it gets to the end user, that somebody's not putting a drive in, hitting download, and taking that data out of the organization?
Well, I think one of the reasons that I think we saw customers trying to unify data on their own, try to get down, reduce the numbers of copies of data, one of the main reasons was less copies of data means less things to secure.
Yeah.
We thought it would be really easy to then secure that same copy of data across multiple engines, and it took us several years to get there. It is a very hard problem.
Yeah.
And reducing the number of copies does mean less things to secure. It does mean less things to monitor, less accidents that can possibly happen. Then there's still work on top of that to make sure you have the right features in place, the right capabilities in place, so you can secure that data once and use it anywhere. It's not just about bringing things together, bringing in the context, But having that one place, everyone working off the same copy, you can set that security once, monitor it once, and you start to use it anywhere. Your agents need a source of data. They can literally start to find everything. When your data is locked in silos, it's literally locked in silos. The agents can't get to it. Now you have one place to find it, one place to discover it, one place to ask for access, one place to monitor that access.
Yeah, and I'll add to that is, one of the things that I hear so often, and I'm sure all of us have heard too, is when we talk to the classic business analyst, like what takes you the most time when you're trying to find that insight? And probably 8 times out of 10, they'll say like, I'm trying to find the right source.
Find it, get the access to it, find the person who can get me the access to it.
Right? You have to connect 4 different data sources, databases. Somebody has to write a pipeline. That pipeline needs to land in a lake. That lake needs to be cleaned and converted into good data. It's already been 3 days, maybe a week.
Exactly. And the VP's like, where is it?
And Ron is still waiting, for a dashboard. But it's not created yet. We're just cleaning the data. And so then you go and you create your dashboard. And then you look at the dashboard and you're like, actually, I want to look at a different metric. Can you please go and add this chart? Yeah. And so it's another day, and you're through 10 days, and you're already behind your competitor, right? Yeah. So now, what if you could actually ask the question and get an answer instantaneously? Because all of these data sources, your operational database that has the sales data, your customer 360 that has your broader third-party data. Let's say Dynamics or something else, Dataverse is in there. You have unstructured PDF documents that are coming in from an analyst, and you want to pull that in.
Another really interesting thing is now you can enable those agents to take action. You can find a place for it in your business process that maybe traditionally you needed that person on standby overnight to make sure that business process, when you're running production line, nothing's going wrong. Now you can put an agent in the middle that sends alerting, that performs some actions, that again, to your point, it just adds that next level of scale for the organization.
Not just are you in one place, it's not just for discovery, but we talked about context earlier. Putting the data together that makes sense to go together also adds context. I have you talked about your CRM data. It can be very structured, but maybe I also have PDFs that go along with it. I have emails that go along with it. All this next to the actual structured data, all that context comes together. And the agent can be fueled by now multiple sources of knowledge, all from that same place, all in a lot of cases in similar formats, but just the placement of the data actually brings that extra level of detail.
And we've been talking a lot about IQ recently. And the idea around IQ is to help you build that contextual layer. But as we've talked about, agents don't always know the connection points between that customer in the CRM and maybe a shipping order coming from a different data source. So the ability to add that context for the agent to know what the relationships are, how they all form together is so key.
And we're talking about just the data kind of stack here, but you then take the data IQ, if you will, Fabric IQ, and you combine it with the AI platform and Foundry IQ, and you combine it with our Office and Work IQ. It truly becomes differentiating and game-changing for our customers.
This discussion has been so interesting, and I think like one of the things as they're watching us today is probably wondering, what can I go try? What can I go do? What are your thoughts? What are your advice for people as they kind of figure out how to navigate this era of AI?
Well, I'll just say you have to roll up your sleeves and jump in. You have to be hands-on. Every leader is hands-on. Every person needs to be hands-on. You have to try. You need to make it a habit. I think that's where it starts. Try out Fabric. We have a free trial, right? It's 2 months. Use it, please use it. Give us feedback. We want to know what we can do better.
Absolutely.
But try it out. Inertia is actually probably a big factor, right? So turn it into a habit. It's humans. Habits are probably the hardest thing to develop. Yeah. So that's where, that's what I would highly, highly recommend is it's human behavior at the end of the day.
Habits are hard to break, habits are harder to form as well.
Yes.
And the best advice really is try at this point, because you don't know where the limitations are. I think we're building some of this stuff. We don't know always where the limitations are. It's changing every day as well, too. So you gotta try things out, see what it's good at, see where it helps you.
Try to find patterns, try to find trends, learn, have fun with it. Just go back to being a student, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Check out the link below to get Microsoft's essential guide for unifying data. See you next time.